Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. I see the light at the end of the tunnel. I do see a light. I don't want to give a date because I've broken the last 3 dates that I've given you. But I do see a light at the end of the tunnel for my current situation, and it is coming soon. That's all I can say is that we'll be back soon. And I've been enjoying these new formats, and maybe this is a good thing. I've been able to shift gears from what we used to do in Boston, which was this quasi format of television / talk radio. And I've been able to divide them, and I'm really excited about the division between what I do during the day and what I do at night. At night, I get a chance to just talk to you, and soon I do see it. I see it coming. Hold tight. I see it coming. Soon we'll be able to do live phone calls again and everything else. And during the day, I do want you to check out. I'm super proud of the work that we're putting together over there at Content News. We just got through finished building our set, and if I'm not mistaken, tomorrow will be the soft launch of Like It or Not with Benjamin Dixon. Whoop, whoop. Yep. So every day at cut it out. Thank you. You're too kind. Every day at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I know, hey, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is the same time that the Young Turks go live. Hey, I told my people, I'm like, hey, let's put it at 5. Let's put it at 8. Let's not put it during the Young Turks. But they wanted to put it during the Young Turks. So we'll be broadcasting our show at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Like It or Not with Benjamin Dixon. It's a good show. Great set. Great content. And it's on content.news. So you can check that out because it's a totally different thing, totally different experience. And then you're going to find which one you like the best. Some of you are going to like what I do during the day better. Some of you are going to like what I do at night. Some of you might even want to consume both. But I'm going to always continue doing what we do here at the nighttime. We're going to have our video back soon. I see it in the cards. I see it in the future. Hold tight. And we'll have our live calls back soon. And then during the day, it is what it will be. So tune in tomorrow. Tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen, on Facebook.com. Actually, it'll be on YouTube as well. So if you're listening to this on YouTube, you can check out the video of on content. Go to the content.news video channel on YouTube. Anyway, one of the topics I talked about this morning was North Korea, particularly Donald Trump's. I'm coming back. Yesterday, I started a conversation on this divide between the black community and immigration, or this attempt to create a division between black people and immigrants. I'm going to come back to that tomorrow. Today, I have to talk some foreign policy. It's very important that we talk foreign policy. One thing that stood out in Donald Trump's speech today was the amount that, or how transparent these people are, from Trump down to Netanyahu. I mean, it is patently transparent. It's hilariously transparent that they're interested in a very particular world order, that they're very interested in a particular approach to the world order. It's the approach more so than the straight world order. Their approach to the world order is one that will always create blowback for their nation. I'm listening to the response that Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, had towards Donald Trump's speech today, and he spoke about how in the last 30 years he doesn't believe he's ever heard a speech that strong before the United Nations General Assembly. And in the speech, the part that Netanyahu has to be referring to is the part about Iran. And Donald Trump labeling Iran as a rogue regime that exports violence and exports, et cetera, all the while every word that he utters undermines the security of Israel, because it undermines the nuclear agreement that was not perfect, but like my colleague Daniel said, it's good. The decent agreement that President Obama created with Iran that delayed Iran's ability to get a nuclear weapon. It doesn't stop it, and anyone who says it stops it is not paying attention. It simply delays. And this is going to kind of be the shelf on which I hinge this entire conversation tonight is the inevitability of nuclear proliferation. That's really what we're talking about today. It is inevitable unless we are willing to destroy nations, which Donald Trump seems to think he's willing to do. And this, before I go into the overall point, let me keep to the sub point, which is illustrated best by Benjamin Netanyahu's embrace of Donald Trump's belligerent rhetoric and Donald Trump's belligerent rhetoric. Both signal to me the same thing that George W. Bush signaled to me, which was, and the same thing many conservatives signal on the international stage, particularly in foreign relations. Donald Trump tried to cast I don't even know if he realized what he was saying. He said that they embrace a realist approach, which is a very specific ideology, political theory, and ideology in international relations. And people try to cast realism as simply blowing shit up. And I use that phrase not to use profanity, but because in my PhD program, when I was debating this back and forth with my friends, many of whom were conservatives, are conservatives, they're still my friends, but they described a realist approach on the international stage as blowing shit up. And I had to explain to them that's not what realism is on the international stage. You have realism, you have neorealism, you have liberalism, you have neoliberalism, you have constructivism. They're all different approaches to explaining. You have the English school. You have. I'm sorry. I know I break up sentences in the mid thought, but I have to call it when I remember it. Neoliberal institutionalism, right? You have all these different paradigms in international relations theory that try to explain the structure of the world order and tries to explain conflict and peace in the world order. And so one of the prevailing theories is realism, because that's how America generally interacts on the international stage, or at least they think that's how they act on the international stage. In realism, we try to, and I'm more of a neo-realist than I am a neoliberal or a liberal. And neoliberal in this sense, guys, is not the economic paradigm only. It is a foreign policy approach to conflict that includes a neoliberal economic paradigm. I'm not a neoliberal even in international relations. I'm more of a neo-realist that understands the nature of the international order is anarchy. All right. If you're hanging with me so far, you're going to be able to get you a bachelor's degree in international relations. Anarchy is the basic structure of the international order. This is not anarchism. This is not chaos. This is the absence. Anarchy in international relations is the absence of an overarching authority to which every individual nation must be beholden. There is no Leviathan. Leviathan coming from the I believe Hobbes' English history of the English Civil War, in which he describes government as the Leviathan that comes out of the sea that all men fear. Well, when you don't have an overarching government, and there is no world government, every individual nation on the international stage is able to do whatever they want to do within the confines of the structure. And so every nation is able to pursue, and is quite literally required to pursue, their own self-defense. They are responsible for their own selves. And there's no police. There's no world police, no matter how much the United States wants to act like that. Now, I'm going into all of this is because this is something that Donald Trump specifically referenced, was their realism approach to foreign policy. And a lot of people mistake realism as war and conflict, but that's not what realism is about. Realism is about is obtaining power. It can best be boiled down into this conversation about getting power and having power to do whatever your nation wants to do. If your nation wants to commit genocide, you have to have power. And I know I just started with the absolute worst shit possible, but just give you an example. If your nation wants to have peace, it has to have power in order to implement that peace. So realism, contrary to conservative and neoconservative beliefs, is not about blowing shit up. It's about obtaining power to carry out your goal. Whatever your goal is, your goal changes based on administrations. And here's the distinct difference, right? Realism is always about getting the advantage, always about having an absolute advantage over your opponent, right? And so with the mindset the conservatives bring to the conversation, conservatives like George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, Donald Trump now, Benjamin Netanyahu is right-wing conservative in his own political spectrum of Israel. And all of them seem to believe that belligerent language and conflict and blowing things up is a signal of strength, and they cast it incorrectly as them simply being realist. And they are signaling in an academic way, in the academic sense rather, that they are trying to abide by a worldview that academicians, I think that's the right word, that they can say, okay, the president is operating within a particular framework. But he is not. And here's why. This is the most important thing. I went all the way to say this. There are so many occasions when your belligerence undermines your power. And anytime your belligerence undermines your power, you're not being a realist, you're being an idiot. Tweet that out. Right? And so what I mean by that particularly is the invasion of Iraq. This was considered to be a big, brash, bold move, shock and awe. And we're going to show the world, and we're going to forever imprint our democracy on the Middle East. And we are going to show the globe how powerful the United States is. And 13 years later, or 14 years later, we are weaker because of it. The United States is in a weaker position because of it, both politically, economically, and militarily. I'm just making words up. In terms of the military, in terms of our defense, in terms of our defensive posture, because we weaken the region. We weaken the buffer state of Iraq to Iran, and now we're dealing with a eventually a nuclear Iran. Whereas their nuclear ambitions would have constantly been buffeted by Saddam Hussein and a powerful Iraq. But now Iran was so happy when we overthrew, and you know who else called for the overthrow of Iran? Benjamin Netanyahu, of Iraq rather, Benjamin Netanyahu. And now Benjamin Netanyahu has to deal with a nuclear Iran in about 10 years. So it's a blowback effect that constantly slaps the United States and neoconservatives globally in the face, because they're under this misconception, an intentional misconception. It's intentionally being obtuse. They're underneath this misconception that if they just go in with their military force, that is the way for them to show strength and to gain power. And too many times we've seen that military force becomes the Achilles heel through which we are weakened on the international stage. There would be no nuclear agreement with Iran if Iraq was still in place. You know why? Because Iran and Iraq would have fought each other to the death before Iran would have gotten a nuclear weapon. But we had to show our strength and go to Iraq. And now, why is it important today? It's because a good portion of Donald Trump's speech before the UN General Assembly was about Iran. And Benjamin Netanyahu, who hates, and Israel generally has great antipathy towards Iran, they are eagerly awaiting the opportunity to destroy the Iranian regime. But didn't we just go through this? I don't know, 14 years ago. Was it 2003 we invaded Iraq? Yeah, 14 years ago, 2001, shortly after September 11th, we invaded Afghanistan. And we are weaker because of that. But that's not the one I'm talking. That's not the war I'm talking about today. But Iraq, didn't we just go through this with Iraq? Yes, we did. And have we ever learned anything? No. Why? Because we don't want to learn anything. Why? Because this is a catch-all phrase. I know people use it all the time, but when you see the Senate overwhelmingly pass a military expenditure bill for $750 billion, with no significant debate. I mean, it just passed. No rallying from any Democratic senators. Only people one Republican and I believe 8 Democrats, including Bernie Sanders. Rand Paul was a Republican, voted against it. But everyone else, from Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, everybody else, Elizabeth Warren, all the way down, they voted for this. And so they can afford, the neoconservatives can afford to be intentionally obtuse and undermine the nation's security because there's billions of dollars, trillions over time that go into the hands of contractors who execute these wars that are sold to the American people as means and methods of strengthening us, even though the reality has always been, in many cases, and particularly with Iraq, has been weakening us all the way. And now here we are getting ready with the same language with Donald Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu. Benjamin Netanyahu spoke to Congress and before a Congress committee. I don't know if it was a Senate committee or a House, but he spoke in 2001, 2002, speaking about how if we go and we overthrow Iraq, then the people of Iran will look and see that they can't behave in this manner. And reality, what they did, Iran sat back and laughed at us because that strengthened their position in the middle, in the region. And now here we are, years later, in a weakened position because now we have to deal with Iran's nuclear ambitions. Whereas if Saddam Hussein in Iraq was still intact, yes, Saddam Hussein was an insane genocidal maniac, but he was an insane genocidal maniac that we installed and also one who would have kept Iran in check. And so here we are now weakened. And we're going through the same cycle over and over and over and over again. And if we're going to talk about Obama is, and we're going to talk about Democrats' role in this, the role that Democrats play in this is that they don't stop it. Right? They don't do enough when they are in power to undermine this. The only thing I can say positive about Democrats, particularly Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, and hell, even Jimmy Carter, is that they don't do much to expand it. They do. And no, this is not a hyperbole and this is not special pleading. But if you absolutely look at the framework that they're handed, they play within the framework. They do not expand the framework. I mean, I can think of some exceptions already as I say that, but within the confines of the conflicts that we're already engaged in, Barack Obama did not turn us around. That's their sin. But Barack Obama and Bill Clinton did not take us into a new region of war on a scale that keeps us engaged for generations. This is what Donald Trump is attempting to do. This is exactly, and this is why when people try to redeem George W. Bush, I don't think it could be stressed enough that what George W. Bush did to the world has changed the world for the worse for at least the next 2 generations, at a minimum. We are still stuck and engaged in a quagmire that George W. Bush is going to be dead and gone, and his grandchildren are going to still be dealing with the quagmire. And so there should be no redeeming of Bush, of Dick Cheney, of Halliburton, who still gets contracts. But here we are playing this game, and we rehabilitate people who should not be rehabilitated. They should be the scourge. They should be the dregs of society, but we rehabilitate them. And by we, I mean everybody. Maybe not you, but I'm talking about all the political players, all of the media, all of them. You know, they bring them onto their shows. They let Sean Spicer come on stage at the Emmys, and we can just laugh about it. Ha ha ha. Key. Here's this dude who's lied to us every single day for the past 6 months, saying some of the most damning and detrimental things, but now he's a part of the Emmys. That's because America's political class and America's media class, they are so forgiving to everyone except a socialist. But I digress. And so whereas Donald Trump is expanding this, he's looking for opportunities to expand this. Barack Obama's sin is he played ball the same way. He just did not expand it. Yes, it was, people say, well, Ben, he took us into Syria. He took us into the different, there are wars, there are proxy wars, there are skirmishes. And this is not to absolve Barack Obama of anything because he's the droner in chief until, well, actually, I have to stand corrected. I believe Donald Trump has surpassed Barack Obama. I have to look at the numbers, but I do believe Donald Trump has surpassed Barack Obama on drone killings of civilians. So let me take that. He may not be the droner in chief anymore. But he was at the time. Let me continue on my rant. He was at the time the droner in chief. So this is not to absolve Barack Obama, but this is to show you the fundamental difference in their worldviews. The fundamental difference in their foreign policy and their worldviews is Obama, Bill Clinton, and Jimmy Carter, the last three Democratic presidents, have not challenged remotely anybody, hell, since Eisenhower, has not challenged the military-industrial complex that has made trillions of dollars off of the death and destruction across the globe, particularly in Middle Eastern, North African nations. They have not done anything, and so they are complicit. They are complicit and they are responsible because they are the people at the time during their presidencies. They had the power, but they did not do it. All right. So I want to make sure that people understand that this is not a special pleading for Barack Obama or any Democrat, but clearly you must be able to see the difference between maintaining the military-industrial complex and expanding the military-industrial complex. And when I say expanding, I'm not just talking about expenses and spending. I'm talking about engaging us in global wars or at least regional wars that last generations. This is where, we're in regional conflicts that will last generations. And so this is exactly what I'm saying. We are so engaged in a quagmire that the next Democratic president is going to now own George W. Bush's war. And whether or not that Democratic president has the wherewithal, the political will, or even the capacity to bring those wars to an end, that begs to be, that's the question that has to be answered. I don't know, right? Sometimes you're in a freight train and you're going at a speed. The momentum alone, if you hit the brakes, will kill you. Right? So it's quite possible that we can't end the wars because we've created such a big mess that if we end the wars, now we saw the void that we left, the vacuum that we left, and ISIS just ran in and took advantage of it. So here we are with two fundamentally different worldviews. One that's not one from the Democratic Party that's not going to stop the military-industrial complex, period. And I don't think anybody's going to argue that. And we see in so many ways how the Democratic Party is complicit with the military-industrial complex because it's all laughs and giggles to them. It's all fun and games to them so long as it's not on our shores. And you also have the Democratic Party being complicit in the sense that they have a neoliberal worldview. I'm not just talking about the economic worldview. I'm talking about the political, the foreign policy worldview. And this is where you get the Iranian nuclear deal, and this is why it matters. In international relations, I am a neo-realist because of reasons that I've explained on so many other shows, but I'm not necessarily antithetical to, or I don't really have an ambivalence towards neoliberalism on the international stage from a foreign policy perspective, not from an economic perspective. Please understand the difference before somebody sound bites me and said Ben wants neoliberalism on the international stage. On the foreign policy stage, the neoliberal framework is a political science foreign policy theory that explains best Barack Obama's approach to Iran and the nuclear deal. And that deal was, we are going to cooperate, and we're going to cooperate together to bring Iran into the international fold. Iran, you can no longer challenge the international order. Iran, you can no longer be a bad actor, a rogue actor. You have to come and be assimilated. It is assimilation, 100%. And this gave us the ability to give Iran time to change their ways and to become a part of the international order such that they have a vested interest in protecting the international order. And that vested interest happens to be economic. The economic ends, the ends of a neoliberal foreign policy is a neoliberal economic policy on the international stage. I will give you that. That full transparency. I want to make sure that you connect those dots. They are connected in that regards because that's what Obama was trying to give Iran enough time to do. Obama was trying to give them enough time to become like China, right? What Nixon started in the 70s with China, Obama wanted to start with Iran and say, okay, we need you to be a part of the international stage, of the international order. We need you to be vested. We need you to have money, ties. We need the economic interdependency. We need your markets open. We need all those things because if you do that, then we can trust you with a nuclear weapon because we know that you are no more interested in destroying, let's say I'm going to pull up Israel. You have no more vested interest in destroying Israel because you know if you destroy them, then your economic elites in your society will have, I mean, besides nuclear holocaust, right? Besides that, but they have economic ties. And they're more interested in expanding their portfolio than they are destroying the devil, the great Satan. So that is the neoliberal framework. They want nations to get in bed with each other so that there's an international community that is so economically interdependent that we can all but guarantee that a nation that gets nuclear weapons underneath that paradigm will not be self-destructive, particularly because the elites in that society will not allow it because they're more interested in expanding their portfolio than their territory. That is the Obama worldview. That's how we got the Iranian nuclear deal. Now, enter Donald Trump. Donald Trump, he has this juvenile view of foreign policy. He has this juvenile view of international relations, if he even knows what the fuck that phrase means, right? Sorry, guys, but I'm just thinking about how ridiculous he was today. And here he is undermining. And I know he talked about North Korea, but everything that we talked about in terms of Iran directly applies to North Korea. He's talking with all this belligerent speech, undermining the one deal that is keeping Iran from getting a nuclear weapon in the next 2 years versus the next 12 to 15 years, 10 to 15 years. Depending on what date you start from counting. I don't have the date in my head when the Iranian nuclear deal was signed right now, but let's say we have a good 8 to 10 years before they could get nuclear weapons based on the deal that's left. What I started with at the beginning of the show before I went down all of these rabbit holes is the fact that we are on trajectory for almost any nation who has the technology and the scientific capacity will eventually become a nuclear armed nation. Why? Because the alternative is we either destroy them. I'm sorry, there's no either. The alternative is we have to destroy them. And here, Donald Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu, and conservatives. What's that dude? What's that dude who reminds me of the propagandist from V for Vendetta? Brit Hume, not Brit Hume. The guy from Fox News. But anyway, there's another guy on Fox News who said that Donald Trump was the strongest speech that he's seen, or the strongest president we've seen in 30 years. Why? How, Sway? How? Because he got out there and said that he's willing to utterly obliterate North Korea. And he's speaking in language that quickly can devolve or what's the word I'm looking for? Quickly destroy. Let me just keep a simple word. Can quickly destroy the nuclear agreement with Iran. Those are the exact steps that would weaken the United States. And I guess the moral of the story, if there is one major takeaway, is for us to understand what they are doing, the logical fallacy, the ideological fallacy, right? The paradigm fallacy based on them calling themselves realists. This is not a realist paradigm in international relations theory. This is a stupid paradigm. You're constantly shooting yourself in the foot. You're constantly creating the conditions for blowback. You're constantly creating conditions for you to always have to engage in war from a weakened position compared to where you would be if you had not undermined your own best interests by blowing shit up, which is the most juvenile interpretation of foreign policy relations, international relations theory. And there we have it. I mean, I'm trying to think. I'm trying to come up for air from all the rabbit holes that I ran down. But I think that summarizes it best. Is that here they are celebrating Donald Trump's language towards Iran. Here's Benjamin Netanyahu celebrating it. But in reality, if Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump have their way, this undermines Israel. This threatens Israel's security. Because we only have to... Okay. Do you not believe that if we go in and destroy Iran, one, we can't manage that? Not that we can't pull it off militarily. It's not that we can't pull it off. It's that we cannot manage the bureaucracy that's going to be necessary to occupy and sustain all of the warring factions that will evolve or develop from the fractured state. Remember I said that on the global stage, the reason we have conflict is because there's no overarching authority that's going to keep, say to Iran, no, behave yourself, pop them on the hands. America, no, behave yourself, pop them on the hands. America's trying to become that overarching authority. And maybe, I don't know, depending on who you argue with, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a terrifying thing. But America is positioning itself to try to be that Leviathan on the global stage. Right. And the reason someone could argue that that's a good thing is because, empire. I mean, I'm sure there was, on the world stage when Persia was the greatest empire on the land, that there was peace within the empire. The only people that were fighting were the people who challenged the empire, but all of the nations that they gobbled up into their Leviathan, all the nations they gobbled up were at peace now. Peace through destruction, of course. Now, don't get it twisted. I understand exactly what I'm saying, but some people would argue that we could have global peace and global order if there was one nation or one empire, one world order. Anyway, I'm not even here to discuss that so much as to use that as a comparison on what would happen to Iran if we fractured the government that keeps all of the individual factions, all the individual, I can't think of the word, regional conflicts within the nation, the different, I don't want to call it tribal, there's another word for the ethnic conflicts. The ethnic conflicts, all the divisions that exist in Iran would explode and create small warlords in each region of Iran, whether it's based on religion differences, Sunni versus Shia, whether it's based on ethnic differences, whether it's based on economic differences, it doesn't matter. Once you destroy the head, you fracture everything underneath it, and everyone underneath it now has the ability to do whatever the hell they want because there's no overarching authority. There's no longer an overarching authority in Iran. Case in point, Iraq. Case in point. We cannot put that nation back together because we fractured the head, and now all of the warring factions, and not to mention all the outside influences that came in, we have a situation that cannot be remedied in some cases. So as it is on the international stage, it is on, consider this. Hell, could you imagine if the United States federal government was fractured? You would have state versus state, right? You would have, every state would mobilize their state National Guard. Right? Every governor will call up their troops and protect their borders. So now you have 50, or you think of the contiguous states, 48. You have 48 border conflicts, probably more when you consider all the states that border each other on multiple sides. Think of all of the regional conflicts that you would have. Think of all the ethnic conflicts, all the racial conflicts. Can you imagine what would happen to the United States if the federal government was blown out of existence? And now apply that same chaos to what would happen in Iran if Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu had their way. And yet and still, they want to sell it to you and to the rest of the world as though they are going to make the world safer and stronger by, instead of dealing with one hostile state actor, destroy that state actor, and now you have, a dozen warring factions. And the United States military is not equipped. I mean, hell, they're going to have to start shipping us over there. The United States, they're going to start shipping academicians and professors over there, in order to try to manage the bureaucratic nightmare that is managing a nation that no longer has a central government because it was blown out of the water by cowboys like George W. Bush and now Donald Trump. So all of that to say that I'm blown away. Yes, I'm preaching to the choir, but I'm sure there's a conservative listening here and there. But more importantly, I'm equipping you with the arguments to help you understand, or help them understand, or at least help you to argue against this notion that it is a position of strength for us to invade and destroy a nation. And because it is not in our best interest to invade and destroy the central government of these nations, the inevitable outcome is that most of these nations will become nuclear armed nations. Which creates one last thing that I want to talk about. And it's the same as that story. If we talk about North Korea and all the people who are promoting and supporting North Korea, particularly from the left side, the anti-war movement, a lot of people are pleading on behalf of North Korea. Listen, I get it. Hey, America's an empire and everybody has to be afraid of the big bad empire. And I'm not saying that to mock you. It's fundamentally true. And then the next move is to say, oh, well, what gives us the right to tell North Korea not to get a nuclear weapon when we have a nuclear weapon? Okay, so once we go down that train of thought, you are no longer an anti-war progressive. And hear me out. Before you flip your shit, calm down. Don't throw your podcast away. This is what I'm saying. You move really into the jaded arena where I exist. So welcome. I want to welcome you over to the dark side. Here's the dark side. There is no peace through simply the absence of war. There's peace through stability. And stability often comes on the back of the threat of total destruction. Because if you are going to argue that North Korea has the right to get a nuclear weapon, then you are arguing that every single nation has the right to get a nuclear weapon. And I would say you're right, because it's an inevitable outcome unless we are constantly going to war to destroy their nuclear potential. And we are not going to do that, nor should we do that, for many reasons, right? But what that does create is individual nations, including the United States of America. You are freezing in perpetuity until such time that somebody actually gets dumb and pulls the trigger. But until that time, you are freezing in perpetuity the current world order in which the United States and China, well, it was Russia for a moment, but right now, so the United States and China are probably going to be going back and forth with each other economically on who's top this year. It's going to be like Boston and LA Lakers back in the 90s, right? It's going to be back and forth. Some years it's going to be China, some years it's going to be the United States. But you're freezing in perpetuity the exact world order that you hate. This post-World War II order, this post-World War II stability that's stable on the back of skirmishes, on the back of proxy wars, on the back of the military-industrial complex. All of this plays a role into, let me rephrase that. All of these individual traits that we hate so much are a result of this post-World War II order, which is stable based on nuclear proliferation. And the fact that Russia still has enough to obliterate the United States, America still has enough to obliterate most of the world. And now, because you are encouraging the nuclear proliferation, let's just call it what it is, right? Because unless we destroy North Korea, they're going to get a nuclear weapon. And that is nuclear proliferation. And so it's not peace. It's not peace for the sake of peace. It's not peace on the sake of pacifism. It's not peace for the sake of disarmament or as a result of disarmament. It's peace through the persistent threat of mutually assured destruction. And I'm okay with that. I just want to make sure that I'm just trying to make sure that you know what you're asking for. Because that's what it is. Every nation in time is going to become a nuclear armed power. Maybe not Costa Rica because they've abolished their military. But every nation, over time, we're going to go through the same thing. Before, God willing, I live till I'm 90, we're probably going to go through this with, I don't know, maybe we should project out. I don't want to just call out some names, but I'm sure there's some researchers that already projects when this next nation is going to become a nuclear armed power. And guess what this does, though, right? This is the other thing. Not only is it peace through the threat of war that you're enshrining in perpetuity, but you're also enshrining in perpetuity the neoliberal economic paradigm. Because when North Korea gets the nuclear weapon that can reach the United States, and let's just pretend that they are smart enough not to actually shoot it off, right? Let's pretend that they're good actors, right? And America's the only bad person here. I'm sorry, I am being a little dickish here, but okay. But let's go with the Ajuma Baraka from the Green Party here. Let's go with his argument that America's the only rogue nation and North Korea is actually, they're okay. Let's go with that. And they don't shoot off their nuclear weapons. Do you know what they're going to do with this? Which is totally makes sense to me. They're going to use it to force their way into the international fold. On their terms, yes. But, it's not like they have a functioning communist society over there, folks. Right? What are their terms? What are their terms economically? Their terms are, hey, trade with us. Right? Their terms economically is not that they're going to be able to assert a new economic paradigm on the international stage. Their terms are, you can't bully us around. You can't change our... And this is, I'm sorry, let's go one step further. This absolutely has nothing to do with the North Korean people in general. It has everything to do with freezing in perpetuity the Kim Jong-un regime. Or the Kim regime. The Kim dynasty. That's what that is. Because this is really about protecting the people who are in power now, using nuclear weapons to protect the structure that they have internally right now. Okay, cool. That's what they want. I'm not arguing with you about that. But what I'm letting you know is that this is not about them bringing anything revolutionary to the international stage. This is just a self-preservation of their ruling elites. Their ruling elites want economic wealth just like everyone else. And so you are enshrining the neoliberal economic paradigm on the international stage as well. To which I say, I personally, I know some of my friends who would love to see a proletariat revolution take place on the international stage, even if it costs the lives of millions of people to bring in a glorious communist revolution. I get it. Me personally, I want stability. I told you that. I confessed that. It took me a long time to confess that. I want stability. Because to me, stability is the closest thing we could possibly get to peace. And I've exchanged my naive hope for true peace in exchange for stability. And if that means nuclear armed nations globally that are all engaging in a neoliberal economic paradigm, and the best that we can do as working class people is to demand everything that we can out of it and it'll ebb and flow. That's what stability is. If that's what keeps us from killing millions of people, if that's what keeps us from doing even more damage than we're already doing to each other, that is the ugly nature of stability. That's the ugly nature of peace. But why? But you're just saying, Ben, how do you get that to that conclusion? Because read Francis Fukuyama. One of his underlying premises, the subtext is that this is the end of history because we can't really transition to a new world order because we are really pointing guns at each other, saying, as long as you don't move, you don't pull your trigger, I won't pull my trigger, and let's see how much work we can get done with guns pointed at each other's heads. That's quite literally what we are discussing when we talk about not destroying North Korea. And I'm on your side. I'm on your side. The last thing that we need to do is to destroy or go to war with North Korea. That is the absolute last thing that we need to do. Why? Because we don't do it well. Number one. Number two, we don't have the manpower nor the bureaucratic infrastructure to manage another broken regime. Just everything I said for Iran, apply it to North Korea. It would be chaotic. It would be China getting involved. We do not need a conflict, which is why we must, well, two things. One, Donald Trump needs to shut the hell up. But then two, we need to recognize the stark differences between democratic approaches to foreign policy, which is broken, which does not beat back the military-industrial complex. It doesn't change anything. It actually operates within the confines. But what it's not going to do, based on everything that I've seen, Kim Jong-il had a deal with Bill Clinton, and Barack Obama made a deal with Iran. Everything I've seen from their foreign policy, yes, they have proxy wars. No, they did not end Afghanistan. But I'm hoping you can understand the jadedness of my worldview. I could be wrong, but the reality is this is where I'm a neo-realist, right? I'm a neo-realist in the perspective that, I mean, we're starting from a very horrible position. I'm laughing, but I'm also crying on the inside. We're starting from a broken position in which we can consider these proxy wars that kill hundreds of thousands of people every single year. We actually have to consider that stability, especially when we compare it to where we came from on a global order, on a global scale. People, my friends particularly, and hey, listen, I'm just a voice crying in the wilderness. I'm just one guy. You could ignore me. You could cut me off and never listen to me again. But my friends in particular would be disgusted with me if I described what we have now as peace. Well, I would never call it peace, but what I would call it is stability. And stability is the ugly twin of peace. I mean, no, this is the twin. Like, no, please stay away from me. You're that ugly. But this is realistically, I think, in so many ways, when we consider our options, this is not me just making a declaration, but look at our options with Iran. Do we destroy them, or do we let them get a nuclear weapon over time? And if we let them get a nuclear weapon over time, that means that we've allowed them to be assimilated into this neoliberal economic worldview. It's kind of ugly, but it's better than us destroying each other with nuclear weapons. It's better than us going over there and fracturing another country. North Korea, same exact thing. Do we destroy them, or do we let them get a nuclear weapon and over time let them get assimilated into the neoliberal economic worldview, which is still ravaging the working class internationally, right? Poor in the global South internationally. But what are the other options? What are the options really for it? So anyway, I'm done. I'm done. I didn't mean to go this deep, but I had to talk about it particularly because we have, here's the thing, and I can simplify it here, and I'm done. I've said that at least 20 times, but I think I'm really done here. We have bad, which is what we currently have, and we have magnitudes of order worse. We have bad, and we have cataclysmic. We have Democrats who are okay with operating in bad without really even significantly arguing about how we can make bad a little bit better. Where I come in is, listen, let's argue about this and how can we make bad at least a little bit better. But then you have bad, you have a little bit better, that's what I'm arguing for, and you have cataclysmically worse. And this is exactly what people like Benjamin Netanyahu want and Donald Trump want, neoconservatives want. The military-industrial complex does not want that. You know why? They're willing to play on the edges and the margins. But you know why? There is no profit to be made if we all kill each other. I mean, the military-industrial complex, the key component of it is being able to sustain war in perpetuity. You can't sustain war in perpetuity if we've all blown each other to smithereens, right? So even the military industrial complex doesn't really want what Donald Trump wants and people like Benjamin Netanyahu want. Benjamin Netanyahu wants the complete suppression. They want their enemies to be utterly crushed and brought into submission, no matter the cost, even if that cost is a nuclear conflict. Because him undermining the nuclear agreement through Donald Trump, that is going to push Iran to getting a nuclear weapon before they have been assimilated into the international community, which makes them a rogue nation with nuclear weapons. All right. I've been all over the place and back again. Here are the key points if you got lost in the minutia. Number one, power is not blowing up things, or the ability to blow things up, or the ability to destroy regimes or regime change. It's not intervention. Power is not intervention. In fact, all of those things undermine your power, right? Power is the ability to get done what you want to get done. And can anyone actually say that we've gotten anything done in Iraq except for supplying infinite amounts of money to the military industrial complex? So this is how you read through all of that bull, all their rhetoric. It's never about actually accomplishing a democracy in these regions or even protecting Israel, because everything that we do over there in the Middle East, every time we blow up a nation, we have created more enemies for us to have to deal with. So that's number one. Power is not about regime change, intervention. It's not about any of those things that Republicans, particularly neoconservatives, have pushed down our throats for generations. That's number one. Number two is that in time, if we are not going to destroy every single nation's capacity to get nuclear weapons, in time, every nation with the scientific capacity and the economic capacity will get nuclear weapons. And so we will have a world that is stable, not through the good intentions of men, a world that is stable, not through the goodwill of men or the peaceful, loving, reformed minds of men. We will have stability through fear, a balance of terror, is what John F. Kennedy called it. That's number two. Number three, included in that balance of terror is the economic paradigm of neoliberalism, which we all hate so much, but it has a, 1945? So we're talking about 62-year advantage, a 62 or 72 year. Yes, math was a long time ago for me. I used to be a math major many years ago, but a 72-year advantage. Neoliberalism has a 72-year advantage of being reinforced by the economic paradigm, by the military paradigm of mutually assured destruction. So it has a head start on the entire world order. And that is why if we enshrine, if number two of what I said is true, that each of these nations will become nuclear power over time, then that means that they're going to be able to insert themselves into the international community, and they're going to be economically inserted based on neoliberal economic policies. Which means, ultimately, I would say be careful what you wish for, particularly with North Korea and Iran, but I'm on your side. We should not lay hands off North Korea, hands off of Iran. But just understand what that really means. And that means nuclear armed nations all around the globe. And that means the neoliberal economic paradigm will be reinforced by yet another nation with nuclear weapons. I know but it's stability. Yes, it's the ravaging of millions of lives based on exploitative economic policies. Yeah. But, the alternative is the United States being willing to go to war over their number one national interest, vital national interest, which is free open markets, capitalism. When you think about the alternative, not only the alternative, but quite literally what is the natural outcome or the logical conclusion of us advocating at the top of our lungs for President Trump to not invade North Korea and not undermine the nuclear agreement we have with Iran. The logical conclusion is yet another nation with nuclear weapons being assimilated into a neoliberal economic paradigm. That is the bad news. Or that's the good news. I don't know which way you can read it, however you want to read it tonight. I'm done. I'll see you guys tomorrow.